Whitley.
Okay, so I have like 5 pages of detailed comments, but I'm not going to read all of them. I'm going with a short version and limiting my comments specifically to the proposed zoning overlay and its relationship to the initial study or the mitigated negative declaration. So to address the proposed zoning overlay from the perspective of the ISMND, it boils down to whether it adequately assesses the potential environmental effects pursuant to the stipulations of CEQA of the overlay on the collective National Register district, individual contributing structures or elements within that district, as well as other National Register listed or eligible properties in the historic downtown. This initiates several questions in my mind. Does the proposed zoning overlay benefit the district, its contributing elements, or other significant historic resources, either directly or indirectly? So the proposed overlay adds no specific protective covenants, preservation incentives, or other measures that would directly improve or enhance the National Register district. Therefore, no benefits have been presented that would directly enhance preservation, protection, significance, or integrity of historic resources beyond the protections that are already in place. Despite the presentations of the applicant's team and the city staff, there's no compelling evidence to suggest that the height and lot coverage limitations in the National Register district are what is preventing redevelopment of vacant lots there. There are lots all over Petaluma that do not fall under the same restrictions as the historic district, some very close to it, that sit vacant and are not being developed for other reasons. The suggestion that a wave of economic opportunity or new housing will suddenly appear because this zoning overlay is permitted is purely speculative at this point. Assuming there are no direct benefits to the district's preservation specifically, then does the proposed zoning overlay adversely affect the district, its contributing elements, or other significant resources? National Register eligibility has already been determined for and applied to the district, and the proposed overlay would not immediately affect that. However, significance under both CEQA and the National Historic Preservation Act is determined by the application of criteria for integrity. These 7 aspects of evaluation include location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And these are the Secretary of the Interior standards. In considering the effects on each of these criteria, I would argue that location, design, materials, workmanship, and association are likely to not be affected by the proposed zoning overlay, and the effects could be considered neutral, at least in the short term. On the other hand, setting and feeling are very likely to be adversely affected by changes to the height and lot coverage restrictions. Setting is the physical environment of the district, and feeling is the property's expression of the aesthetic or historic sense of a particular period of time. Without question, adding new construction anywhere within or near the district would have some kind of effect on both the integrities of setting and feeling, and any proposed project would need to be evaluated individually for its specific impacts pursuant to CEQA, or as we see with the HSPAR process. But it is reasonably foreseeable that allowing taller and larger construction projects in the district or in the overlay makes it inherently more difficult to minimize adverse direct or indirect effects to the district's integrity of setting and feeling. These kinds of impacts might not be just visual ones, but could also include altering pedestrian or vehicle traffic flow, changes to infrastructure or utility services, as well as future reduction or segmentation of the district boundaries. Overall, there would be a much greater potential for more adverse and inappropriate disruptions to the continuity of the district's setting. The feeling associated with Petaluma's downtown National Register district is conveyed not just by the presence of these individually significant buildings, but by the entire collective of them, which is why it was nominated as a district to begin with. Largely, the expression of feeling in this instance is the visual relationship between and among all of the buildings. The district is much more than the sum of its parts. It is also reasonably foreseeable that changing the height and lot coverage restrictions will also make it far more difficult to maintain that integrity of feeling, even if proposed projects still need to be evaluated individually, because the district is evaluated collectively. Over the long run, if this zoning overlay were to be approved and the city did not provide counteracting preservation incentives or some other forms of mitigation, it's reasonable that we would likely see the erosion of additional integrity criteria, the other ones I mentioned, as individual historic buildings deteriorate, become neglected, or abandoned, and or separated from the larger district. Skipping over my hotel comments. Does the ISMND actually address the clear and significant adverse effects to the integrities of setting and feeling for both the zoning overlay and the hotel? The documents which are supposed to cover the potential effects on historic resources are appendices C for the overlay and F for the hotel. Neither document actually addresses the nature of the integrity criteria specifically, mentioning only the general setting and never the integrity of feeling. Both state that the southern portion of the historic district has lost integrity in general due to the presence of modern construction, but no specific factual evidence of this conclusion or how it was evaluated is actually presented. Assessment of effects documents, and I've been writing them for over 35 years, should always specifically reference each of the criteria for integrity and evaluate the potential effects for each one objectively and cumulatively. This appears not to be the case for either of these documents, and I would suggest that they are inadequate to support an MND for the zoning overlay or the hotel. The proposed overlay clearly is what we would call a but-for condition. But for the proposed EKN Appellation Hotel, the zoning overlay would not have been proposed, which is why there's only one CEQA document. It is also being proposed as a mitigation measure in and of itself, suggesting that it would increase economic opportunity and the availability of residential housing without any actual supporting factual evidence of that. I would recommend that the Planning Commission reject the draft ISMND, as the proposed zoning overlay clearly has significant adverse environmental effects on the integrities of setting and feeling for both the National Register District and other nearby National Register listed historic resources that will not be sufficiently reduced by the proposed mitigation measures or by the overlay itself. An MND is not supported, in my opinion, and an EIR should be completed with an alternative site analysis. Otherwise, we should be waiting for the general plan. Basically, that's all of my comments.
Thank you.